So just so you are aware that I will be recording this forum, and the recording will be made available to you. The presentation was already made available. And right. So in terms of the question and answer section, you could raise your hand, you could put your questions in the chat, or you could just open your mic and speak. I will now put a poll on the screen so that you could fill out in the meantime. So it should show up on your screen and you select what suits you. So how informed do you feel about on-farm soil and water management? So just select the one that suits you. And so if you could keep your mics on mute, you could turn on your videos. And right now I will pass on to Dr. St. Martin to give us the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all who are present. I must say it's indeed a pleasure to have you there. It is something that we have been planning for a while, and we're very excited. So we are finally glad that we are actually executing it right now. I wanted to first of all thank those who actually helped in actually putting it together and have been part of the previous sessions that we have had. Real aim here is to better connect with the people on the ground there to get a sense of what is required and to facilitate collective action as it relates to building climate resilience into agriculture. So that is the main for us there. This is actually part of what a project that we are currently implementing that is called a soil-centric approach or activities in the Caribbean. And we are doing that in collaboration with another project, the Eco-Based Solution Project, or what we call Strengthening Climate Resilience, Coastal and Marine Resilience in the Caribbean. And so we are trying to actually put all of these things together. So at the end, there's a strategic way of developing the capacity and giving the people, the stakeholders involved in agriculture, what they actually need. So that is what we're excited about. We're excited about using this forum as a tool to actually connect deeper and actually deliver on what people have requested. So in that vein, what I want to do is, for those persons who probably don't know too much about ECA, ECA is really a hemispheric organization with Americas, and our main mandate is informed by the priorities of the government, and we work on literally agriculture development and rural well-being. So that is the key focus, and we have key technicians and office in almost all of the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean countries. You have the technicians actually here right now in the session, and they have been pivotal in assisting or even championing the development of agriculture and technical cooperation work in the Caribbean. So I want to give the thanks to them as well as to the representatives. I also want to acknowledge and bring greetings on behalf of the Director General and also the leader of our program, Kelly Witkowski. They are also excited about that, and they look forward to the development of that particular initiative. So again, folks, thank you so very much. There are just a few things that I want to say because I really do believe in actually getting to the meat of the matter, so to speak, and also being very clear as to what we are trying to do here today. So one of the things I want to get very clear is that this webinar series, and we felt because we have had it before, we needed to add some more value to it. And so there are several ways that we have decided to add more value to it. One of it is that we are assuring that everybody who participates in all 4 of the webinar series, they're going to be awarded with a certificate of participation that could serve as entry requirements to other courses that ECA has and other programs that you may be interested in, and also some other trainings that we are also going to be having through other projects. So that for me is a very key thing, because it does allow you a kind of a family approach to bring the group or carry through the group through a lot of trainings that either will be happening now, later on, or even available through a virtual platform so that you could access. So again, I say that so that you could keep tuned, keep with us, so that you could get these opportunities or make use of these opportunities as well as share it with others. So that is one of the value addeds that we are very excited about. In addition to that, we felt that because ECA is an organization that really has or sees itself as a bridge and is very action oriented, we decided that the participants in this webinar who have attended all 4 of the webinars, and also based upon a criteria of participation on a country level, we would be awarding at least 2, will be providing at least 2 awards per country at the end of this seminar here. These awards are really aimed at practitioners and also support technicians, that a small contribution to say, okay, perhaps you may be able to start off or implement some of the things that you have learned there. They're not $1 million prizes, a big thing, but it is appreciation of you taking your time, being at the webinar, and also a commitment that we are trying to establish, that we are not only talking, but we would like to work with you in terms of implementing some of these actions. So these are the keynotes, and these are the key value added, apart from the relationship that we will be developing, or we hope to develop with you as we address the issue of strengthening soil health in the Caribbean and all of the downstream positive effects that could be achieved. So with that, I also bring greetings on behalf of the regional director here, Dr. Kurt Dillis as well. And I thank you so very much and look forward to your engagement in the other sections. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nikhil. I think you're on mute, Nikhil.
Yeah, we usually hear that in every webinar. Sorry about that. So now we'll go directly into the presentation of our guest speaker, Dr. Gregory Gouveia, who prefers being addressed by his first name. So Gregory Gouveia has a PhD in soil science, specializing in the use of nitrogen isotopes in soil-plant relations, and has been a lecturer in the Department of Food Production of the University of the West Indies since 1995, showing that he has a wealth of experience in this field, and with responsibility for courses in soil chemistry, soil fertility, and pedology. He also developed the first course at UWI on climate change issues and has been a consultant to 2 national communications on climate change matters for Trinidad and Tobago. He has also attended many workshops throughout the region on greenhouse gas inventory methodologies and mitigation and adaptation strategies for the agriculture and forestry sectors. He has supervised several students pursuing PhD and MPhil programs in soil sciences and related fields. He has published in international journals and conference proceedings and has traveled widely, including most of the Caribbean region. Dr. Gouveia is particularly interested in the sustainable development of this region's agriculture sector, with his priority being the need for the sector to be more secure and less vulnerable to climate change influences through sound soil and nutrient management. And he is quite passionate about this field and the development of the sector in the region. So I pass you on now to Dr. Gouveia.
Yeah, good morning, folks. Good morning in particular to the organizers of this webinar, the extension officers, other technocrats who are in attendance, but especially to the farmers, who are arguably the most important people in the world, because they provide us with the food that we need to be able to survive. Just a second. Right. So you all should be seeing this the slide on your full screen, not so?
Yes, we could see that.
Good, good. I wanna move something here as well. Right, so that's the title. You're familiar with the title of my presentation. All right, and I'm pleased to share with you a few facts and some of my ideas on strategies that are best suited to build and sustain resilience at the farm level to the hostile climate that has already started to emerge in the Caribbean. This is an outline of the issues that I'll be covering. I'll have a brief intro, just to touch very briefly on climate change and what it really means for us in the Caribbean. Then I'll go into the core issues with this presentation, which will essentially deal with matters relevant to climate smart agriculture, which has primarily to do with building resilience and so forth. Then I will summarize by listing some of the key takeaways in the event that you would have missed a few things. I really don't expect each and every one of you to be able to capture everything that I'm presenting, but at least if you're able to capture and appreciate and understand one thing, when you go into your breakout groups and you collectively have your discussions and so forth, all the issues that I present would be at hand. Right, so there I have a definition by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of what climate change is in a condensed version actually, right? And the reality is that as a result of human activities, primarily the consumption of fossil fuels, a lot of greenhouse gases have been accumulating in the atmosphere. And those greenhouse gases are actually responsible for global warming, which is actually driving some of the climate-related adverse events that we're experiencing, such as sea level rise, more extreme events, greater climate variability, and so forth. So what's in store for us in the Caribbean? The sea level will continue to rise, has already started for quite a while and will continue, and in fact continue at an increasing rate, more than likely. We'll have a reduction in total rainfall, and that's the prediction by Cuban climatologists. But we could probably agree that we have not really necessarily seen that as yet. The frequency of extreme events will continue to escalate. The climate will get even more unpredictable, and temperatures will continue to rise, as has been happening for more than 100 years. Unfortunately, the Caribbean, like many small island developing states, is highly vulnerable to these escalating adverse events due to very high population densities and small land areas, especially in relation to the island nations in the Caribbean, due as well to many of the nations in the region having small and fairly fragile economies. And most of the Caribbean is largely not food secure. The solutions to many of the challenges that I've identified in some of the previous slides lies with climate smart agriculture, which addresses two key aspects. The first is adaptation, and this involves farmers building resilience on their farms against the adverse climate-related realities to which I referred. And then secondly, you have mitigation. And regardless of the magnitude, all nations have a responsibility to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, to halt climate change, and secure a better future for all. Should Caribbean priorities be on adaptation? Of course. And why? Because the consequences of not building resilience can be very severe. Additionally, we, the smaller developing nations, have not been responsible for climate change, as our greenhouse gas emissions are extremely insignificant compared to the much larger nations who are the main culprits and are the ones who need to focus much more on mitigating their emissions. Fortunately, however, much of the strategies I will describe to build resilience will simultaneously mitigate greenhouse gas emissions as well. So why the focus on adaptation? The simple answer: increasing temperatures will increase evapotranspiration, causing soils to dry out faster. It will also increase carbon loss from soils by oxidation, causing a breakdown in soil structure. And the increasing temperatures can very likely directly reduce yield, as many crops in the Caribbean may already be at or above their temperature optimum. Rising sea level, which has been happening for a while and will continue, can cause increased salinization of our limited key agricultural resources, which are soils and water resources, and in some cases, even lead to complete inundation of coastal farmlands. Drought can reduce yields or completely cause crops to die, particularly evident, and sandy and coast-textured soils are particularly vulnerable. Excessive rainfall can induce soil erosion, saturation of soils, excessive flooding of croplands, and with clear and fine-textured soils being the most vulnerable. And then storms and hurricanes, for which we have seen our fair share, but unfortunately will continue to see them at a higher frequency, can completely wipe out crops, as many of you throughout the Caribbean are aware. So let's get into the actual adaptation strategies. While there's another webinar that is likely to address it in more detail, I have included this one slide on crop-based strategies because, in my opinion, it is so important to building resilience at the onset. I could not find the source, but I certainly can recall the statement I found many years ago, which I want to share with you. And I'm paraphrasing here. The further away a crop is from its climatic and ecological optimum, the greater the likelihood of crop failure due to adverse climate-related events. That to me makes a lot of sense, and I hope it does to you as well. And so the first strategy speaks to that particular issue. I would advise that we develop country-specific agroecological zoning systems to be implemented in the Caribbean to guide farmers on the range of crops that are most suited to their lands and their locations. Secondly, to further reduce risk and maintain a regular income to farmers, farmers should use multiple cropping systems and staggered harvesting. The latter can naturally occur by having diverse crops in multiple cropping systems, or can be done with a single crop by staggering the planting dates. And cover crops, which are primarily used to conserve soil, water, and nutrients, which is extremely important, which is in keeping with building resilience, can also be included as cash crops as well that could provide some direct and immediate financial benefits to the farmers. On to the soil and water adaptation strategies. Soil and water issues are intimately related, and they're really hard to separate, as one of the main aims in soil management is to optimize the availability of water and nutrients to maximize crop yields. The key adaptation strategy that I've identified is a shift to conservation tillage systems, or at least for farmers to reduce the frequency of conventional tillage operations. In conservation tillage, only a targeted portion of the land, and not the entire land, is tilled, and much of the residue from the previous crop is left in the fields before and after planting the next crop. Cover crops also have a role in this system as well. The benefits of conservation tillage. It improves soil quality, mainly through carbon conservation and sequestration, which in turn promotes aggregation and improves soil structure. And this in turn increases infiltration and drainage that minimizes erosion, runoff, and flooding in times of excessive rainfall, and particularly in times of storms and so forth. And secondly, it also improves water retention and storage to allow crops to better cope with periods of drought. Some of the other benefits that are specific to the use of crop residues in conservation tillage systems is to reduce erosion during excessive rainfall events. The crop residues as a mulch on the surface also reduces evaporation during drought periods, so it conserve that precious water, especially during those dry spells. And it can also control pests such as weeds in particular as well. Other relevant adaptations, and these are aimed primarily at maximizing crop yields, which equates, in a sense, once you maximize crop yields, that equates to being able to remove a lot more carbon from the atmosphere and potentially have a significant portion of it being transferred into the soil. And two important adaptations that I've identified relates to irrigation water management and crop nutrition management. First of all, irrigation water management. There are two important things. Farmers must begin to engage in regular testing of their irrigation water. Because living in small island developing states, you find that a large portion of the farming community in many of these nations are actually very close to the coastal zones, where there's potential for intrusion of salt water, of saline water, of seawater underground. So especially those farmers who are in those areas that may be using underground water as a source of irrigation, at the very least, you need to check it for the salinity level, right? pH is also somewhat important, but I think more important would be a test on salinity. Farmers must also, with respect to irrigation water management, because the occurrence of extreme events, including droughts, is actually escalating as we move forward, right? Farmers must enhance water use efficiency by using low volume systems, such as drip and other targeted application systems, as well as even sprinkler holes. There's less energy consumption, and so an additional benefit would be a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions with these low volume irrigation systems. With respect to improved crop management, farmers need to ensure their crops get all 18 of the essential nutrients. 18. It's not just 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. It's 18 nutrients that have been identified as being essential for plant growth. And if any one of the 18 is not available for uptake by the plant or the crop will not perform well, and you will not achieve optimum yield of the crop. So that is really, really very important. And while water in soils and pests and diseases on crops are visible to the naked eye, farmers can see that. So you can look at your soil and see that it's very wet, or see it's very dry. If it's very dry, you know you need to add water. You can look at it and see pests flying around. You can see diseases. Once you capture it early, you can take some action. One cannot see nutrients in the soil or in the crop. There are some signs, but you don't want to rely on signs or visible symptoms of deficiencies, because if you do see it, you need to take action. But by that time, more than likely, there will be some reduction in your potential yield of the crop. So you want to be able to identify deficiencies very early, very early. So the only way you could do that is by testing. So farmers must rely on nutrient analysis of soil and crop samples to determine the nutrient status, and to also use that information to develop fertilization plans. Anything otherwise, so if farmers have not been testing their soils and their plants, anything otherwise is actually guesswork. On the mitigation side, we first need to know what is responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. So with respect to carbon dioxide, which is CO2, soils have more carbon in organic forms, that is, than the atmosphere and above ground vegetation combined. But when soils are disturbed by tillage operations and so forth, whether it's mechanical or manual, much of that organic carbon can actually be lost as carbon dioxide as the organic carbon decomposes under aerobic conditions where you have a fair amount of oxygen. With respect to methane, which is CH4, under flooded rice cultivation that's where it's most prevalent. That carbon, organic carbon in the soil, instead of converting to carbon dioxide, will actually undergo anaerobic decomposition, meaning decomposition in the absence of oxygen, to form methane. And then the third most important greenhouse gas that actually is lost from the agricultural sector is nitrous oxide, which is N2O. And that comes primarily from the use of nitrogenous fertilizers. And when I refer to fertilizers, I'm referring to all fertilizers, whether synthetic or conventional, right, or organic or natural fertilizers. The strategies to mitigate these emissions. First of all, with respect to CO2, you need to reduce tillage operations by engaging in conservation tillage, or at least, if not fully, getting into conservation tillage systems. Because when you go online, if you Google it, you'll see that there are certain specific requirements and so forth with respect to the amount, the proportion of the land that has to be tilled, the amount of residue that has to be left on the surface of the soil and so forth. For the very least, you can reduce the amount of tillage operations that you engage in presently. Right? Additionally, keeping more crop residues in the field potentially is able to add more carbon to the soil instead of it being lost to the atmosphere. You can use manures as well, but you have to be careful with using too much manures, especially poultry litter, which can have a fairly toxic effect on plant growth, especially when it's applied in even just moderate quantities. You can also use cover crops in this context as well, especially those with deep rooting systems that are able to add carbon to deeper layers in the soils, where in those deeper layers, the carbon is a lot more protected. So tillage operations not likely to impact or cause that carbon to be lost. And then with respect to methane, because the bulk of the methane in the agricultural sector actually comes from rice fields, the key strategy to reduce that methane is to drain the rice fields at strategic times, maybe at times when you have to apply fertilizer and so forth, because that drainage will actually allow some aeration of the soils, which will significantly reduce potential for the carbon of the soils to be anaerobically decomposed to methane. And then finally, nitrous oxide. To mitigate that emission, you need to apply nitrogen in the right quantities and at the right time. So you have to rely on testing your soils, testing your crops. Be able to develop fertilizer plants that are able to recommend the right quantities of fertilizers in general, not just nitrogen, right time and in the right way and so forth. Right, so in summary, and I think I'm approaching, you probably have a minute or two. In summary, I would like you to go with some key takeaways and some recommendations. First of all, climate change is real. And even if you think it's not, or not very evident in your location, which might actually be the case, because climate change doesn't actually occur at the same intensity in all parts of the world, or even in all parts of the Caribbean region. Climate variability and sea level rise is occurring. And that can be compounded by land use changes near your farm, which could have devastating consequences on your crops. Secondly, your priority, as I indicated, should be adaptation, which is the need to make your farm more resilient to adverse climate-related changes, to ensure good yields, to ensure that good yields can be sustained and you can be financially secure. Third, want to remind you, you need to test your irrigation water regularly, definitely for salinity and even for pH, and also the other things as well, all right? And you should engage, if you have not already started, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, these low volume systems, such as drip systems, all right? Because good quality water will become more and more scarce. Fourthly, you need to test your soils and crops as well for the essential nutrients. And with respect to soils, there are other tests that you need to perform as well. And those tests should be done at least once per crop cycle. And it can be done at any reliable laboratory, whether it's local or foreign. And the test data can be used in developing fertilizer recommendations that will provide information to the farmers on the rates of nutrients and fertilizers to apply, the timing and the type of fertilizers and so forth. Many of you have probably never tested your soils or even your irrigation waters. So you need to really think about that very seriously. It is a really very small cost relative to the huge benefits to be gained from engaging in this testing. Fifth, establishing the agroecological zones must be the responsibility of the administrators and technocrats of agriculture in the various countries, and not the responsibility of the farmers. And sixth, you need to be, as farmers, you need to be very observant and keep records, because the circumstances on your farm is will likely be very much different from the circumstances on the farm of another farmer, even though your soil type may be the same, even though your terrain may be the same, but circumstances around your farm could impact on the hydrology within your area and definitely within your farm. And you may find it strange that how come your neighbor's field with the same soil type, same terrain is not flooding, but your farm is flooding. Or the reverse, your farm is drying out a lot faster than the neighbor's farm. So remember that a key issue with climate change is its unpredictability, and things can happen very suddenly. And finally, note that the key strategies identified to combat climate change and its consequences are not unknown or even new to most of you. It's just that you may have never thought of them in the way in which I have described. A little bit on some of the work that has been done at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. I myself, together with some of my students, we have done some research more on the mitigation side with respect to reducing emissions, with respect to reducing carbon dioxide emissions from acid soils receiving agricultural lime, which is calcium carbonate. And also I've had another student who have looked at reducing nitrous oxide emissions from urea use. And you know that urea is by far the most important nitrogenous fertilizer, not only in the region, but in the world. I'm not specifically aware of work done on comparative assessments of adaptation benefits between conventional tillage and conservation tillage systems at the field level, but there have been some lab-based studies that I myself have been involved in, as well as other members in the soils unit at the Department of Food Production, that provide some evidence of the benefits to the structural features of soils when they are amended with organic materials. So in closing, I want to thank you. Thank you for your patience. And if each one of you at least captured and understood just one thing I've said, then I'm very happy. Best wishes to you, the farmers in particular, as it is really a challenging era that we're already in and emerging even deeper into, with the dark cloud of climate change hanging over us. That brings me to the end of this presentation. Do you have any questions? Is there one of the moderators?
All right, thank you, Dr. Gavaya. That was rather interesting presentation, particularly where you highlighted the effects of climate change directly and how it affects farming in a direct sense. Some of the adaptations and mitigation approaches that can be utilized to aid in assisting with the effects that farmers and technicians are feeling today. I want to open the session right now for any questions and answers. You can indicate by just raising your hand, and as I see the hands raised, I will delegate who will ask their questions. We have Prince Avery, go ahead. Mr. Avery, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
I'm hearing you.
Yes. Good morning, fellow agriculturalists. I would like to make mention of also the importance of planting crops that are resilient, to heat stress in a time of, harsh conditions, especially in the time of summer. I think that would be that we can look at as well, in addition to crops that are less prone to be resilient in the heat versus planting outside, but planting in greenhouses.
Yeah, that's a
Hello?
comment. Yes, I
Yes.
fully agree with you. And that's where the zoning, the agricultural, ecological zoning, where a nation can be subdivided into these zones, where within each zone, specific crops can be recommended that are less likely to be negatively impacted by adverse climate events, including the stress to which you're referring to.
Miss Lord.
Good morning, Marcia Lord, represented from Grenada. I'm listening to Dr. Bouvaille in his key takeaways and recommendations for farmers. Test irrigation water regularly and use low volume system. Test soils and crops for essential nutrients. This type of system is something that farmers have been clamoring for a long time ago. And I'm happy to hear this is one of the key takeaways. What I'm concerned about is under this climate change system that ICA is assisting with this program, if assistance will be provided from ICA to the farmers to access these key takeaways. Thank you.
I imagine that is for ICA to respond to. I'm interested in hearing ICA's response as well.
Yeah, thank you. I will answer that here. Yeah, thank you for that very key question. And like I said at the beginning, what ICA is, and that is the whole essence of this webinar. We are really on the action on the ground. While we do have bridges high up, we are really there on the action on the ground. And even that webinar, when I explain how we actually do it, in terms of one, the value added with this program, this particular webinar series to allow you entry into other courses or other levels of training, also awarding actually some reward for persons that would have participated there, at least 2 per country to get things going. It really speaks to ICA commitment. But even larger than that, what I wanted to also, and I was leaving it to the end, that issue of getting the readiness of the Caribbean to transform that in the ways that Dr. Gobaya spoke of, it is really critical. And that is what ICA currently has, the first regional agriculture readiness program on green climate change that is currently being implemented to actually introduce and build capacity in that. And 9 of the CARICOM countries, you will be seeing activities in that. And the entire aim of that is to, one, develop two proposals, probably close to about $40 million, to allow that implementation of some of the things that we will be talking about in this webinar series. So in short, the answer is that ICA is very committed and has been committed over the last 78 years, probably 45 years there, to actually helping the stakeholders make that transformation. And we are always wanting to hear or connect to the ground for the people to inform the direction that we should be going to. And that is the exact essence of that webinar, to keep on getting that feet on the ground kind of aspect. We also have, as you saw on the beginning of the program, we have several projects. This webinar is part of several projects that's aimed at is actually putting money from funders. We wrote projects and were successful to actually implement eco-based adaptation. One of the examples is that ICA was involved with Iron Movement, was involved in the first shipment and use of vetiver grass in a systematic way, actually shipping it from Dominica to Antigua to reduce or to mitigate against soil erosion and also some of the pollution there. So there are a number of activities here, and I'm asking you to please stay tuned through the thing. You will learn the exact thing. Actually, the last webinar that we're going to be having, we are going to be sharing all of the investments and the time and the technical cooperation that ICA has undertaken as it relates not only to soil, but other areas that we are involved in developing agriculture. Thank you.
I just want to add as well that to you farmers, while I agree it is necessary for the region, the administrators and so forth, and other institutions to really develop that capability for testing water and soils and crops and so forth. If I were you, I would not wait. All right. If there are no labs available locally, then you can send your samples abroad, because it could be really devastating to your farms. If some of you in particular have been using irrigation water, underground water, that is saline, and you've been using it for years, but you don't know because you've never tested it. And the water looks absolutely very clear. In fact, if you happen to taste it, it may not taste like seawater, but it don't have to be that saline to be causing almost irreversible, or at least very difficult to reverse, damage to your soil.
Thank you.
Your mic, Forrest.
Moderator, is there moderator?
You're probably having a problem with on Forrest's side. Could you go, is it Rihanna? I'm seeing Rihanna's hand up on my screen. Could you go ahead, open your mic and ask the question? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm a big fan of your work, Dr. Kavaya. Glad to have milestones with ICA and the incentives for farmers and vertical projects moving well. But I want to know what the main challenges have been to change this paradigm of soil management in the larger context of policy across the Caribbean. I know that UE and academia have been working with the Ministry of Agriculture and extension services in a practical way, which I think is important, because we know that the food system has to change to promote more regenerative soil management, especially with the dominant mode of our current food system being the synthetic chemicals. So how do we build more resilient soils through agroecology and organic methods, and what are the policies that we're pushing and the main challenges?
Yeah, I hope I captured everything. I was really hearing you very clearly. But in my opinion, I think Trinidad is probably one of the worst. Our leaders don't really care much about agriculture. You know, it's just in passing that, you know, some reference will be made, you know, we need to be food secure and stuff like that. In my opinion, what is happening is that a lot of the food importers in Trinidad, and that might actually be the case throughout the Caribbean, they're the ones who are financing the political parties and financing governments, right? And if we actually become truly food secure by being able to manage our soils better so that we could increase our yields and actually produce more of our food, it means that we'll have to import less food. And that could be bad for these finances of the political parties, right? My suggestion again, and I want to remind you all of it, right? Whatever you can do on your own, if you're not getting the technical assistance, right? Soil testing, water testing in particular is really, really very crucial. And it's an investment that you will see immediate benefits for, all right? So if you're not getting that support down here by your country's providing free testing services and so forth, just send your samples to a lab and pay for it. That $1 you spend, the benefits could be multiple times that. All right.
Thank you. Again, we are a bit pressed for time, so I'll take one last question. Any person that is having more questions, please type them into the chat and we'll respond to you as best as we can. So Mr. Gregory Bailey, go ahead.
You sound familiar, bro.
Yeah. The low volume system. What are some of the considerations we need to have as it relates to systems that require pressure? The interaction between low volume and pressure. And the issue of testing, that has been a RKC for many of us. Sometimes you get tests at the central lab, but for some reason the technicians are not able to provide the type of guidance in terms of evaluation as is required. So if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah. Gregory, honestly, I didn't hear you very clearly, but I think I captured the really important things. And one of the things that I understood by your question is that in spite of tests being able to be conducted on whether it's water or soils and so forth, right? Another important aspect is how that information, how that test data can be used to make recommendations. Right. And yeah, making fertilizer recommendations is really very difficult. Water quality testing and the recommendations that can be made from tests on water and so forth is quite simple. Because if the salinity is very high, right, then one needs to recommend to the farmer that you need to stop immediately using that particular source of irrigation water, right, as well as other things. But with respect to nutrient analysis on soils and crops, and the prime reason for doing that is to be able to not only to identify whether the nutrients are at present in the crop or in the soils at sufficient quantities, but to make fertilizer recommendations. That is actually quite difficult. But I have been doing a lot of, I have had a lot of interest in that particular aspect for a long time. And I could tell you that if it weren't for COVID, we would have started a soil and plant and water quality testing service at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine in the Department of Food Production, where from the soil testing service and the plant testing service, we have been able to provide fertilizer recommendations. I was able to actually get access to a fertilizer software program. There are a few of them are wrong, but there's a really good one that's coming out of Israel called Smart Fertilizer Plant. And they offer different packages to farmers and as well as packages to, let's say, labs that want to offer a testing service and fertilizer recommendation service to farmers as well, right? But farmers can also directly contact them to, after you've gotten your test data, wherever you get it from. If you don't get a fertilizer recommendation or any recommendation or a recommendation that you are a little suspicious about, you could probably contact them, and for a small fee, they might be able to use the data that you have and provide you with a recommendation. I hope that addresses probably your most important concern that was highlighted in your question.
Thank you, Dr. Gavaya. There was someone else whose hand was up, but I saw the hand came down. Can that person ask their question, please? I think that.
You put it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes. I'm Cuthbert
Hello?
Monroe from St. Lucia.
Are you guys hearing me?
Are you hearing me? I'm Cuthbert Monroe from St. Lucia.
Yes, Cuthbert, please go ahead. We're hearing you clearly.
Yes,
You guys hear me?
what I wanted to pass on to the Ministry of Agriculture, especially the Extension Department. We farmers in St. Lucia, it varies. Some farmers grow bananas, some grow food crops, some grow root crops, some grow vegetables. And we all depending on the banana fertilizer. I would acknowledge that the Ministry of Agriculture to do more soil analysis, soil tests, so that we know exactly the nutrients the farmer's soil needs, you know, because we're using just one fertilizer. Is the banana fertilizer. We need to do more analysis to know exactly what fertilizer the food crop farmers can use, the root crop farmers can use, the vegetable farmers can use, and the banana farmers can use. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's an important observation, important comment. You'll find that even for the same crop that is being grown on a different soil type or at a different time, you may need to make adjustments and some changes to your fertilizer plans or your fertilizer recommendations. So to be using the same type of fertilizer, whether it's 12-12-17-2 or fertilizer with the same grade and same concentration of NP and K, right, to the same crop every time, so just imagine how bad that really is for using it on different crops as well, right? So those are some issues. They've been there for forever, and they really need to be corrected, really need to be addressed.
Right. If I just step in here, colleagues, what we are trying to do, we make a short adjustment to a small adjustment to the agenda. What we want to do now is perhaps go into the breakout groups so that we could discuss, two questions, and then we would come back and we would try to do a short presentation by the persons in the group, and then we would allow some time for further questions. So during the break, Dr. Gavaya, with the help of Nikhilya, would look through the chat and see how many questions we could answer, as well as you will have another opportunity when we get back from the breakout groups to have some of your questions answered. So please bear with us as we go through that. So thank you very much for your questions, and also Dr. Gavaya for sharing this, and we will continue. We wanted to move on to the other activity on the agenda. And we wanted us to listen very carefully here. We wanted to we are going to break into the breakout groups, and we want to do that on a country level. And the entire intention of that breakout groups, which is the activity is going to be about 15 minutes, not very long, is that we want to answer these two questions, or we want to hear from you about these two things. What essentially are the things that are hindering the adoption of some of the good soil management and water management practices? And then what also are the actions that need to be taken to address these barriers? So these are the two questions, again, that we are going to have in the group. When we break out into the groups, the process will be that in instances where the ICA national technician is present in your group, they will automatically be the moderator, meaning that they will capture the answers or your responses to these in this Google Sheet that is on the screen there right now. So all you have to do is to participate and share your opinions on these two questions, after which they would engage in a short kind of wrap-up discussion so that you're ready when we get back to the main session to present the responses there. So that is really how we are going to do it. I would recommend that within the groups, you perhaps spend the first 10 or 12 minutes trying to answer these two things. Again, be very specific and perhaps spend the last 3 minutes organizing to make sure that all of your responses are put together nicely so that the presenter could actually present on your behalf. When we get back into this session, we are going to have the presenters present by in alphabetical order of the country name. We also would want, if, for example, listen very carefully, if some of the barriers and the actions have already been mentioned, please note that we do not have to say them again. We are only going to engage, and I'm asking for the technicians to, or the moderators, to listen very carefully, because we don't want to be repeating the same thing. Only if there is substantial difference in what the previous person has said, then we are going to go ahead with the sharing there. If not, we are just going to go to the question sessions where more questions could be answered. So is that clear to everybody? I hope yes. If you could use the reaction, you could give me a thumbs up, or perhaps just wave there. Right. So thank you very much. We are going to ask Nikilia now to just get us into these breakout groups so that we could do these things very quickly. I'm going to ask Forrest to also keep a time. There's an automatic time there, but I'm also going to ask him to keep time. Right, so good day.
For the persons that are still in the main room, you should have the option to be able to select the group for your country you are in.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I'm seeing a link. I'm seeing a link to breakout groups. Group
So
questions, but I'm not being allowed. It's saying you need permission, blah, blah, blah.
to join the group.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was, that's what, okay, so let me just ask, Brent Judges, what country are you from? Carmen Nurse?
Hi, sorry, Brent Georges, Antigua and Barbuda.
Antigua.
I am not
Carmen
getting
Nurse?
St. Lucia.
Lucia. I seen a Galaxy A01. Gregory Bailey. What country are you from, Gregory?
Antigua and Barbuda.
Okay. Jamila Salabas. What country are you from? Rhoda Herbert, what country are you from?
Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay. Karomo Brown, what country are you from?
St. Vincent and Grenadines.
Lawrence Knight.
St. Kitts.
Marcus Richards.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Nadine Wilson Smith.
Jamaica.
Okay. Raquel Woodley.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Rafk Bailey.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Okay. Renato Gums. Rudy Nellam. Said Ponda. Shakira London. We have Slory.
I am from Suriname.
What's the name?
My name is Chanel Faslori. I am from Suriname.
Suriname, okay.
Yes.
Yasmin Ali.
Grenada.
Tavia Holness. Shakira London. Anybody out of the group, can you just give me what country you're from?
Hello. Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Welcome. We are in breakout groups discussing some questions. What country are you from?
Jamaica. Sorry, I went and I got a call, so I didn't get a chance to say.
Okay. What country are you from? So I could put you in the group?
Jamaica.
Jamaica. Okay.
Incentives. So along with the training and education and so on, we do need to have some incentives for persons to choose a low-till cultivator over the plow tractor, for example, and so on and so forth. So those are, I trust the group. I would have captured in essence what was shared, and I would fill out the form at a later date.
Thank you so much, Damien, for that. I will just go on and say that most of what was articulated there in the Trinidad, that also came up. And so definitely we won't have time to go through all of the countries, at least to share what you have learned, but we would have captured them as much as possible, either now or later through the Google Forms, and we will capture them going forward. I wanted to, we're actually on the closing time, but I wanted to open up the floor to see if there are some burning questions that you would like answered, apart from what has been answered in the chat. And then we would proceed with the closing remarks by Mr. Derek Charles afterwards. So again, colleagues, if you have to leave, that is okay. But if you could stay on and you want to ask some key questions there, I would invite you to do that now. Thank you. Please show by the raise of hands or perhaps open the mic. If not, we are going to close the session and go straight into the closing remarks.
Good morning, Franklin Maglo, Dominica. I had a question in the chat, but I didn't see the answer. But my question, when I'm looking at the Dominica perspective, in terms of testing, water testing, as mentioned, what would drive the testing of water? Is it the frequent use or the source? Because I know for some of our farmers, the water supply is way up into the mountain, undisturbed. Would that water still, for agricultural use, would that water still require the regular testing for agricultural purposes?
To respond to that, Franklin, I thought I did respond to your question on the chat. We provided more information. The water source is high up a mountain, hardly likely there will be a salinity issue. And if it's very clear, it's really not likely to have any limitations associated with it. But if it has never been tested, I think it's a good idea to at least test it once. If it's from a source up in the mountain and you test it and it's really good, then you don't need to do that as often as, let's say, other farmers who are operating closer to sea level and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I see Ina from Belize. You have your hands up. Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. My question was mostly with regards to upscaling of these kinds of recommended actions for adaptation. Specifically speaking from our experience here, where we have a mix of small farmers with smallholder systems, but we also have commercial farmers doing large-scale intensive monocropping of most grains and legumes. Most of the actions that the government has taken so far is mostly directed to increasing adaptation and resiliency at the small farmer level. which if you would look at it, a lot of them already have diversified systems. You know, they have traditional food crops as well as commercial commodities that are seasonal. But the lack of experience lies with the large scale commodity producers. I'm not so sure what would be the experience in the region, maybe perhaps in Guyana, but what are some of the actions that from a government perspective, a Ministry of Agriculture perspective, could be done to address these issues with large scale farming?
Is that something for me to respond to, or is there someone maybe from
Yeah.
the ministry who may have some information regarding that particular question?
I was getting the sense, Govaya, Dr. Govaya, if you could answer it in terms of, she's arguing the point of scalability in terms of all of these actions. So if you could at least answer from that perspective, that would be good.
Well, I did make the point that every farm, be it small, medium, or large, is quite unique in terms of the circumstances that exist that would definitely have an influence on the capability or the ability to implement some of the adaptation strategies I referred to. And she particularly made reference to large-scale monoculture farms, be it sugarcane or rice or whatever. Definitely, some of the strategies that I recommend can also be implemented there. The question is whether with these large farms, because we know small farmers are a lot more flexible in a sense, right? And large farms tend to be a little less flexible. Whether they would be willing, you know, a lot of times, especially at the large scale level, and even with small farmers, they need to buy in to the fact or the idea that whatever new strategies or recommendations are being put forward to them will actually be to their benefit. Because if they don't get buy-in, especially with large-scale farms, they probably definitely will not want to change whatever they're doing. They'll probably continue with regular conventional type tillage systems, right? Which may not be the case with plantation type large farms, because once the crop is in the ground, like citrus or whatever, you know, it stays there for a long time. So tillage is not really an issue. But with the larger scale farms, monoculture like rice and even sugarcane, with sugarcane, they will probably still need to till, you know, depending on, you know, how long they leave the fields. The cycle might be range from 5 years and up and so forth, right? It's really about buy-in. It's really about buy-in and really understanding and appreciating. With respect to the role of the ministries as well, because she alluded to that, you know, that would be important, or the support systems that exist in any country that provide technical advice and support to all farmers, whether they're small farmers or large farmers. I hope I addressed some of the issues that were raised.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. We have two hands up, and colleagues, I'm taking the extension. I hope that it is granted in terms of we really wanted to end by 11:30, but I see persons are still connected. And Dr. Gavai, if you're still available, we perhaps will just take a few more questions before we do the remarks. I'm hoping that I'm not stepping over what is convenient for people.
It's fine with me.
Thank you very much. So Naya, is it Naya from Barbados? I see your hands up. Then we'll get the question from Ainsworth.
Yeah. Good morning. This is a question for Dr. Gavoy again too. Knowing full well in Barbados is a water scarce country, and I lead them back to the whole big plantation scenario where Dr. Gavoy, right? We try some conservative, some no tillage, what we call strip tillage. We try to do like sometimes 50%. It always don't happen, but most times we go back to conventional tillage. We plow and then we do something called subsoiling. Well, coming along all my years, I understand that subsoiling actually allows for that watershed moment in terms of water going back to the aquifer, because we really had some issues over the last couple of years with salinity problems, brackish water not pumping, water company had to shut down pumps and that kind of thing. So I just want to know where you strike the balance, Dr. Gavaya, in terms of large plantations, we plant.
You have to, yeah, and that's a good point. And Barbados is quite unique. Sorry. Are you still speaking?
No, go ahead. I listening to you.
Yeah. Barbados is quite unique. You all have a lot of these heavy clay soils, calcareous island. You know, your circumstances. You have to assess your circumstances, right? And you made an important point that with the deep plowing, chisel plowing, I think you made reference to, you're able to improve the recharge of your underground aquifers, underground water bodies, right? But for the very least, you know, what can be done, and it depends on the crop as well, is that, and I made this point as well, is that farmers don't necessarily, whether they're small farmers or large farmers, don't necessarily need to convert strictly into conservation type tillage systems, right? But for the very least, what can be done is you can seek to reduce, even if it is gradually, so you can see whether there are any benefits, right? And if benefits present themselves as a result of reducing the frequency of your conventional tillage operations or any other things that you are accustomed doing, have been doing for a long time, right? And you've seen the benefits of not just improvement in the water retention of soils, which would be important during drought, but improvements in infiltration and drainage, right? And reduction in erosion during extreme rainfall events. Then you can gradually put one step in front and you keep making small steps. You know, it's really sometimes difficult to make a broad recommendation, even for same soil types and so forth, right? Because your circumstances could be a lot different and not just completely influenced by the indigenous soils and even your terrain. There could be other things that are happening around you that you may not even be aware of, right? So I hope I answer your question, but it's not easy. And in the Caribbean, we have a lot of diverse soils and diverse terrain and diverse land use activities that could impact on your circumstances on your own farm, small or large.
Finally, the no-tillage, it increases the soil organic matter, because we've been having problems with the loss and the low percentages of soil organic matter, which we also attribute to the conventional tillage. So that's why I ask sometimes where the balance is, you know, where how much to go, how much to go right.
Yeah, so, sorry, no, some of your contribution is breaking up. We're not getting the full extent of it. So if you could put it in the chat as well, so to capture the follow-up question that you had, that will be useful. In the meantime, we could move on to Ainsworth. Ainsworth, could you ask your question? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Cheney. Just a comment that came out of my group, and just to remind the participants in my groups, and I suppose with all other groups, that your comments have been recorded in a Google form, so don't feel in a way if you didn't get a mention. All right. So just quickly, Dr. Gover, coming out of my group, one of the points that was made is with regards to soil testing and the more attention being paid to the biological properties, testing for the biological properties of soil, because a lot of times, as one of my participants was saying, that a lot of times we test for the chemical and the physical properties, and we don't pay attention to the biological properties of the soil. So, you know, just to emphasize, just to comment on that.
Yeah, it is also important, but I would say one of the really pressing issues with respect to testing in general is that the majority of our farmers in the Caribbean don't really rely on nutrient testing of their soils and crops to develop their fertilizer programs for the fertilization plants, right? And testing of those materials for the nutrients in particular is really crucial to being able to make proper, accurate, and effective fertilizer recommendations. But definitely the biological health of the soil is important, and there are some simple tests, there's some more elaborate tests that can be done, you know, and it could definitely still be useful.
Just one last point, Cheney, in terms of soil testing. I mean, because this is so important, Dr. Govaya. Maybe some farmers, although we encourage them to, you know, to send their soil test to the lab, but there are maybe some basic soil kits that they can actually use to give them some indication as to, you know, what their pH levels are and so on and so forth. So maybe you could, you know, make some suggestions, you know,
yes,
in this forum.
there are a wide range of kits. Lamott is a company that has some of the more sophisticated professional grade kits. And of course, you'll have to pay more money for that. But you can get kits ranging from as low as maybe under $100 US to in excess of a couple $1,000 US, right? One of the easiest tests and cheapest tests that you could perform on a soil is soil pH, for example, right? And on irrigation water could be salinity. So you could get some kits that are really inexpensive, right? Very cheap, right? Most of the time they're colorimetric. They don't actually have to be electronic, right? And if your soil pH is either very low or very high, you have some serious problems. Similarly, if the salinity of your irrigation water, even though it looks very clear and very clean, right? It could have high salinity. And there are very cheap kits that could probably just do salinity alone on irrigation water. pH is not really that crucial for irrigation water as it is for soils.
Thank you for that, Dr. Govaya. We are going to take one more question. I see Akshay there. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but after that, I will encourage everybody to put on their video if you can. So we could just take a shot of this, and then I will ask Mr. Charles to do the closing remarks. Go ahead, Akshay.
Yeah, so you pronounced it correctly. So what I was wondering is that, you know, we are asking for farmers to test the soil and water. For it to be very useful, what is the time period that you would use for testing the soil and the water? How regular would that have to be done? And what would it be based on? Based on the amendments you add to see the changes, or would it be on the life cycle of the crop? How would that vary? And how would that vary with different farms in different areas?
Right, it could vary, all right? So each farm has its own unique set of circumstances. I would say, depending on your source of irrigation water, because at least testing for salinity is not expensive, not very costly, you could do that as regularly as possible, right? You have to know your pocket, right? With respect to soils, if you're doing tests on soils to develop fertilization plants, the test cannot be done after planting the crop. The test on the soil has to be done prior to planting the crop, right? But in terms of really developing and having effective fertilization plans, you should not rely solely on nutrient analysis of soils. You will do that initially prior to planting, right? To help develop at least the initial fertilization plans, the amount and types and so forth. But once the crop gets going in the field, at least once during the life cycle of the crop, especially with short-term crops, at least once, you should take some leaf samples, and there are diagnostic leaves, various leaves that are diagnostic for nutrient testing, and have that test conducted at a time where you can realistically, once you get a recommendation based on the test, you can realistically either go into the field physically to apply fertilizer, or at least be able to apply fertilizer still. It shouldn't be towards the end when you're about to harvest the crop, right? So the circumstances are a lot different. If a farmer is using irrigation water from a stream, from a river, right? We know that depending on the season, the dry season, it may be low. And while it may look clean, because it's low, you may have other types of contaminants. In the rainy season, the major contaminant might just be particulate matter, as a result of soil erosion. You know, so as much as is possible, especially with respect to irrigation water and with fertilizer plants, at least once on the soil before planting the crop, and at least once during the life cycle of the crop. In the case of perennial crops, I would say at least once a year, depending on the regularity with respect to how often fertilizers are applied to pre-crop plantations.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We're getting to the end here. I see some of you have put in on your cameras here, so I'll ask Nikilia if she could just get a screenshot of those that have the cameras on. And Derek, I would invite you to get ready to just close us off. By that, it sounds like the session was very interesting and of use to many people. It almost sounds like we may need to invite Dr. Gobaya to give a part 2 there when he gets down into the nuts and bolts here. If you think so, just let us know that in the chat, and we will try to see if we could convince. I think it should be easy to convince Dr. Gobaya to actually do a part 2 there. So let's put the pressure on him if we want him back there again and see how we could do that in some more detail. So, okay, great. We have a yes there already. Good. So we are doing it by consensus. So people, let's get the rounds. Nikilia, tell me when you've gotten the screenshots of the different persons.
I am ready now. Oh, the messages are coming in, so it's coming on the screen. Hold on. So get ready.
Tell us when to smile.
Smile, say cheese. No. Okay, I got some great smiles. I'm on page 1, so let me just reach to no. Hold on. Let's go again. Smile. Okay. I am now on page 2, so just smile again. Okay, so smile for me again. Get in there.
Right, so we'll ask everybody to keep your smile. Try to keep your smile on for 10 seconds. Lorena, I acknowledge that you took off the glasses and fling it back there. Make sure that we get also a very good picture of Mr. Michael Dalton.
Okay.
I think most
I'm
persons
now on
haven't put on their
page
mic,
3.
so I would invite persons to put on their mic if they're able. I meant camera, sorry.
I see my colleague there, Dean Avril. That's not a smile there. He's not smiling at all. We need a little smile from you, colleagues.
So I have person cameras on up till page 3, so I guess that should be okay. I'm seeing some more cameras coming on. Okay, let me take that again. Okay. 1, 2, smile. Okay. 1, 2. We have to go again. Sorry. One more. Great. Thank you very much.
I honestly thought that this would have been the easiest part of it there, but it has proven to be the hardest part. So I wanted to invite you there. Thank you so very much. I wanted to invite Derek. Could you please go ahead and do the thanks to close it?
Thank you, Channy. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just about lunchtime. First of all, as we come to a close of this webinar, I would like to thank our guest presenter, Dr. Gregory Gobaya, for his stunning presentation. Dr. Gobaya, I have learned a lot from that, and I could identify with an important point you made in terms of the soil testing. I don't know if you know Dr. Terence Fullerton. We worked together, and he actually demonstrated the use of soil testing to improve crop production, and it actually
Yes,
worked.
I know him.
So I must say that, you know him, yes?
Yeah, we studied
Okay,
together.
great. Yeah, right. So I must thank you for that presentation very much. I also like to thank the ICA Caribbean Climate Responsive Agriculture Forum team, Chani and Nikita, and also the ICA representatives or technical representative in the Caribbean countries that actually send out the invitations and invited the farmers and other technical persons to this webinar that was well attended here today. Okay, we know that soil and water are two basic resources for the requirements of food production. During our sessions, the breakout session, it was important to note that from the greater standpoint, water is a major issue in one of our countries, that is Caracou. And one of the concerns of the participants there is that irrigation is important. Irrigation, because right now they're actually doing rainwater harvesting, and there is no concession to assist in that aspect by the government. So that's a major issue. But what I have noticed though is that during our discussion, the certain practices that lead to sustainability on the farm did not come up in a big way. For example, Dr. Gouveia mentioned residue on the field, crop cover. And I think that one of the issues that we have in the region is that we don't demonstrate that enough. In extension methodology, farm demonstration is very important for the adaptation of different practices. And I think in our group, one of the participants did mention that we need to see more of that on the farm. Whatever small changes that we are making on the farm, we need to. For example, if there is an issue with soil and water on the farm, the first step does not always be sustainable practice, you know? In other words, if you have irrigation and drainage are often used to artificially modify soil and water content and also to regulate water deficit. Whereas other solutions such as cover crop, like Dr. Gouveia mentioned, mulching, composting, can be more effective in the long run. One of the things that we notice is that these activities, the result is not immediate, so people tend not to adopt it. But if we could do field trials, a field demonstration plot, we think there'll be more adoption of these type of practices. Dr. Gouveia, I just want to mention that some of the issues raised in terms of what needs to be done on the farm probably closely resembles to that of Professor Ratan Lal, the winner of the 2020 World Food Prizes. His research has led to a better understanding of how no-till farming, cover crops, crop residue, mulching, and agroforestry can restore degraded soils. As a soil scientist, his work focuses on regenerative agriculture, through which soil can help restore global issues such as climate change, food security, and water quality. Our conversation now must be to continue to focus on knowledge, because one of the challenges in meeting targets for good farm practices is overcoming the knowledge gap and also to have agreed methods and tools to facilitate change. Finally, we need to rely on and work with our farmers to take care of the soil and water. According to Professor Ratan Lal, without soil, there is no life. Without life, there is no soil. They have evolved together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Derek, and thank you everybody for participating. Just before we leave, so I just want to give you a quick briefing on the next forum. So our next forum will be on using climate data to increase agricultural yields. So we dealt with soils today, and we will be talking about how you can use climate data in your practices. And also, before I get into that, I'm going to put up another poll. So I did a baseline poll when you enter to get an idea of your knowledge and how informed you feel about farm and soil water management. So I am going to launch another poll just to get an idea of if we got any improvements from the presentation there. So the second forum, while you're filling that out, the second forum will look at various aspects of the type of data that, how you can access data that is relevant to your practices. Also, how you can apply those information in your decision making in terms of when to water, how much to water, when you should look to try and store some water, and also looking at how you can install some very simple and very cheap meteorological offices so that you can access site-specific weather data, because we have, as we are well aware, we have a lot of microclimates within a country, and so some of that information will be provided to you at our next forum. So please indicate if you are interested in participating, and I will send you out all the information so that you could register for this second forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And last push here, I would very much like to, if you could answer the feedback poll so that we know how to improve on what we are doing there. So the last task we have for you is let's at least get it up to 20 respondents. Just click your answers very quickly there. We have 109 persons. So far, 7 persons have replied, and just have a very good day. Thank you for attending, colleagues, and hope to see you in the other sessions that we'll have. Have a good day.
Thanks, Sean. Nicalia, I think the poll shut down quickly. I don't know if I did something or
if you answered, then it will shut down.
No, I didn't finish answering.
Yeah, the same thing happened.
Yeah, let me relaunch it. I'm going to relaunch it.
Great. Thanks. Okay. Thanks, Chani.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I think somebody.
It's going too quick.
Sorry, so the speaker
Oh, now I gotta start over again.
You're the one terrorizing us. You have me getting very nervous here.
Sorry, so the ICA staff, those that have co-host, you will not be able to fill it out, okay?
It's like my breaks, you're trying to find out if we answering the questions correctly.
Sorry, so it's just for the participants, because as I made you co-host, you will not be able to fill it out. So do not click end. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Thanks, Nicalia.
Welcome, Karen. Thanks.
Well hosted.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.